The air in the grand convergence chamber was not air at all, but a shimmering, resonant medium that tasted of ozone and ancient starlight. It carried the thoughts of the assembled Lumen Hegemony Council as much as their spoken words, each syllable a precisely sculpted wave of logic and light. High Arbiter Vorlag stood upon the central dais, his crystalline form a lattice of intricate, glowing filaments that pulsed in time with the slow, solemn rhythm of the chamber's heart crystal. Before him, suspended in the non-space of the projection well, floated the galaxy, a slow, majestic spiral of controlled and understood phenomena. Yet at its trailing edge, a stain was spreading. It was not black, for blackness is merely the absence of light. This was a deeper negation, a form of non-existence that consumed light, matter, and causality itself, leaving behind a terrifying, textureless void. They called it the attenuation, and its inexorable crawl towards the hegemony's core worlds was the silent scream that had summoned this council. Strategos Kalen's form, sharper and more angular than the High Arbiter's, shimmered with controlled impatience. His light was the cold, hard blue of a neutron star. The attenuation proceeds along the predicted vectors. High Arbiter, our containment fields, our reality anchors, they are failing. They are not barriers. They are merely eroding at a slower rate than the void they hold back. The finest minds of the hegemony have confirmed the mathematics. It is an inevitability equation. We are a finite variable being subtracted by an absolute. His voice was a series of resonant chimes, each one perfectly pitched to convey certainty and grim finality. The assembled arbiters and ministers shifted, their own internal light flickering with the cold dread of that pronouncement. For a civilization built upon the absolute predictability of the universe, a problem without a logical solution was a form of philosophical terror. "There are other variables," Loremaster Alara stated, her voice a softer, warmer glow, like that of a rising sun through morning mist. Her crystalline structure was smoother, etched with the spiraling patterns of ancient star charts and forgotten theorems. She gestured a limb of focused light towards a different sector of the holographic map, a small, unremarkable cluster of stars nestled in a turbulent nebula. The species designating themselves as humanity. Their expansion vector is anomalous. Kalen's light hardened. Anomalous is a generous term, Loremaster. Erratic, unpredictable, violent. They spread like a biological contagion, consuming resources with a ferocity that defies all models of sustainable civilization. Their fleets are aesthetically repulsive composites of brutalist kinetics, raw fusion, and chaotic energy signatures. They fight amongst themselves as often as they explore. They are a dissonance in the grand symphony, a note of pure noise. He projected images into the well. Human warships, ugly, asymmetrical things bristling with projectile cannons and missile tubes, clashing in fiery, pointless skirmishes over barren moons. They are primitives who have somehow stumbled upon faster-than-light travel. A cosmic accident, they are of no consequence to the present crisis. And yet, Alara countered, her tone gentle but unyielding, their expansion has not been touched by the attenuation. It flows around their territory like a river around a stone that is itself moving. The anomaly is not just their behavior, but their interaction with the crisis itself. The void seems to hesitate at their borders. Vorlag's light, a deep and thoughtful gold, pulsed slowly. He had presided over the hegemony for a cycle that dwarfed the entire recorded history of humanity. He had seen empires of gas giants rise and fall, witnessed the birth of machine minds and the silent passing of ancient spacefaring leviathans. He understood the universe as a delicate crystalline structure of cause and effect. Humanity was a fracture in that structure. They were illogical, emotional, their actions driven by ephemeral concepts like hope and despair, love and hatred. These were not quantifiable forces. They were instabilities. They are a paradox, Vorlag resonated, his voice filling the chamber with a gravitas that silenced all other thought. Their technology is a chaotic amalgamation. They utilize crude chemical propellants alongside gravitational field manipulators that border on our own understanding. They transmit vast quantities of unstructured data, what they call art and music, that serve no logical purpose, yet they have developed computational systems of staggering complexity to process it. We have observed them, studied their signals from afar. They are a species at war with its own nature, driven by contradiction. A recent patrol, the Stellar and Lance vanished near their territory 3 rotations ago, Kalen interjected, his blue light sharp as a shard of ice. It was a vessel of superlative design, its reality anchor robust. It was investigating a sensor ghost. Its last transmission was of a single unidentified vessel. The energy signature was impossible. It did not conform to any known drive system. It was both there and not there. Then silence. The asterisk stellar and lance was not destroyed. It was removed from the equation. The chamber fell into a profound stillness. The removal of a hegemony vessel was not an act of war. It was a violation of physics. Every ship was a node in their civilization's network, its existence a constant, verifiable fact. For one to simply cease to be was a terrifying prospect. It was the same fundamental horror as the attenuation, but localized, personalized. "And you believe these chaotic primitives were responsible?" Ilara asked, a flicker of disbelief in her light. "The impossible energy signature originated from the vector of their expansion," Kalen stated flatly. "The correlation is too strong to be dismissed. They possess a capability they have kept hidden, a weapon that operates outside the known laws of spacetime. It is the only explanation." Vorlag's thoughts turned inward to the millennia of hegemony history. They had encountered countless species. The silicon-based architects of the Dyson spheres, the psychic leviathans of the nebulae, the digital ghosts of the galactic core. All had eventually been understood, their principles assimilated into the hegemony's grand, logical model of the cosmos. But humanity defied categorization. They were builders and destroyers, poets and killers. They reached for the stars with one hand while clutching a sharpened stone in the other. They were a species that could compose a symphony of breathtaking mathematical complexity and then use that same understanding to construct a weapon of planetary annihilation. "Their existence is an affront to order," Kalen pressed, his resonance hardening. "If they possess such a weapon, they are a threat greater than the attenuation, a focused, malevolent threat, whereas the void is merely an unthinking force of nature. We must act. A preemptive convergence. We must sterilize their worlds before they can bring this impossibility to bear against us." The word sterilize hung in the resonant medium, a cold and heavy thing. The hegemony did not engage in random acts of violence. Their actions were always precise, calculated, a form of cosmic surgery to excise a malignancy. But to eliminate an entire sentient species, one whose nature was so poorly understood, felt like a profound failure of logic. "To act without understanding is the definition of chaos," Ilara countered, her light flaring with a rare intensity. "It is the very thing we decry in them. We have never attempted direct communication. We have only observed, judged from a distance. Perhaps the loss of the asterisk stellar and lance was not an act of aggression. Perhaps it was a consequence of something we do not comprehend." "What is there to comprehend?" Kalen retorted. "We have seen their history. It is a litany of self-inflicted wounds. They poison their own nests, war over trivialities of belief and territory. They are ephemeral, their individual lives a mere flicker. How could such a species conceive of a strategy that we who have watched the stars cool could not anticipate?" "Perhaps," Vorlag said, his voice cutting through the rising tension, "their very ephemerality is the source of their strength. We think in cycles, in eons. Our logic is built upon the certainty of long, slow, predictable change. A human life is a flash of desperate urgency. Their entire civilization is an exercise in frantic, chaotic improvisation against the certainty of their own mortality. What might such a mind, multiplied by billions, create in its desperation?" He turned his focus back to the small, insignificant patch of the galaxy that humanity called home. It looked so quiet, so contained. But he felt a deep, instinctual tremor, the kind of resonance that preceded a seismic shift in the fabric of reality. The attenuation was a known horror. Humanity was an unknown one, and the terror of the unknown was, for a being of pure logic, the most profound fear of all. A junior minister, his form a pale, nervous silver, shimmered at the edge of the council. "High Arbiter," he resonated, his voice trembling slightly, we have received a transmission from the humans." The entire chamber froze. Communication from the humans was rare and never directed. It was broadcast noise, a cacophony of entertainment signals and internal comms chatter that the hegemony filtered and analyzed. A direct, targeted transmission was unprecedented. "On screen," Kalen commanded, his tone sharp. The holographic well shifted. The majestic view of the galaxy dissolved, replaced by a simple, stark visual. It was not a face, not a being. It was a perfect circle bisected by a straight line. Beneath it, a series of complex waveforms resolved into audible sound, translated by the hegemony's linguistic engines. The voice was calm, male, devoid of threat or ceremony. "This is a message from the unified nations of Earth and its colonies. We have noted your vessel's disappearance near our territory. We have also noted your long-range observation of our space and the encroaching spatial anomaly you are monitoring. We believe our interests and our concerns may be aligned. We propose a meeting. We will await your reply at the designated coordinates." The transmission ended. The simple, stark symbol of the circle and line remained, hanging in the center of the grand convergence chamber like a judgment. The coordinates it provided were in a desolate, empty sector of space, halfway between their borders. Silence. A profound, heavy silence filled with the unspoken shock of the council. They were not being addressed by primitives. They were being addressed by a power that was aware of their surveillance, aware of their greatest crisis, and was now calmly, directly inviting them to a conversation. The sheer audacity was staggering. "It is a trap," Kalen stated immediately. "They lure us into the open to display their new weapon. They will demand concessions, territory, technology." Or, Alara mused, her light soft and contemplative, "it is exactly what it purports to be, an invitation, the symbol they used. Our linguists and culturologists have analyzed it from their public data streams. It is an ancient philosophical diagram from their history. It represents in their varied traditions concepts of balance, of duality, of a whole comprised of two halves. It is not a symbol of war." Vorlag stared at the symbol. It was so simple, yet it spoke volumes. It was a statement of intellectual and philosophical depth that seemed at odds with the chaotic, violent species they had observed. He felt the cold touch of uncertainty. Their models were wrong. Their understanding was incomplete. The universe, which had for so long been a predictable equation, now contained a variable of terrifying and unknown potential. To ignore it was to risk annihilation from a direction they had never anticipated. To engage with it was to risk everything else. "We will go," Vorlag announced, his golden light solidifying with decision. "Strategos, you will assemble the Grand Fleet. Not as an escort, but as an undeniable statement of our power. We will meet them on our terms, surrounded by the strength of the hegemony. Loremaster, you will accompany me. I wish for your perspective. We will hear what these humans have to say, and we will discover the nature of this impossibility they have supposedly unleashed." His gaze returned to the dark stain of the attenuation on the map, and then to the small, turbulent nebula where humanity resided. For the first time in millennia, the high arbiter of the Cygnian hegemony felt a tremor of something that his logical mind could not process, could not contain. It was a resonance that was neither fear nor curiosity, but a chilling synthesis of both. The symphony of the cosmos had a new note, and he did not know if it was the herald of a new harmony or the first chord of a dirge. The void at the designated coordinates was absolute. A perfect, silent blackness punctuated by the distant, indifferent light of ancient stars. It was a place where nothing had ever happened, and nothing was ever expected to happen, which made it the perfect stage for what was to come. The Cygnian hegemony Grand Fleet had arranged itself in a formation of breathtaking, crystalline perfection. Their ships were not machines of metal and wire, but grown structures of solidified light and exotic matter, their hulls faceted like immense jewels, radiating power and order. At the center of this celestial armada floated the High Arbiter's flagship, the asterisk symmetry of Truth Asterisk, a vessel whose very presence warped the local geometry of spacetime into a state of perfect, ordered harmony. Inside the command nexus of the asterisk symmetry of Truth Asterisk, Vorlag, Kalen, and Alara stood before the main observation window, which was not a window at all but a perfect, real-time projection of the external void. The fleet was a silent testament to their power, an equation of force so overwhelming that no logical species would dare challenge it. "They are late," Kalen resonated, his blue light sharp with irritation. "A deliberate tactic, an attempt to unsettle us. To imply that their time is more valuable than ours. It is a classic primitive power play. Or, Alara offered gently, their method of travel is simply less precise than our own. We fold space. Perhaps they are still traversing it." Vorlag remained silent, his gaze fixed on the empty point in space where the humans were supposed to appear. His mind was a maelstrom of calculation and projection running through every conceivable scenario. A surprise attack, a diplomatic insult, a transmission of propaganda. He found his logic failing him, for it required a baseline of predictable behavior, and everything he knew about humanity suggested they had none. They were defined by their capacity for the unexpected. The appointed time came and went. The silence in the void deepened. Kalen's light began to pulse with a frequency that suggested he was preparing to issue a fleet-wide alert. He saw this as a confirmation of his suspicions, human arrogance followed by either cowardice or treachery. Then it happened. It was not an arrival. There was no flash of light, no tear in the fabric of reality, no surge of energy to herald a vessel emerging from hyperspace or a wormhole. One moment the space was empty. The next, the ship was there. It did not appear, it resolved. It coalesced out of the void as if it had always been there, and the universe had simply forgotten to render it until that exact instant. The fleet's sensors, which could detect the gravitational whisper of a falling leaf a light-year away, screamed in unified confusion. They registered no entry vector, no temporal displacement, no energy expenditure. The ship had a location, but no history of how it got there. Its existence was a physical paradox, and the ship itself, it was an impossibility. It was vast, larger than even the asterisk symmetry of Truth asterisk, but its size was the least of its strange qualities. Its hull was not a solid color, but a deep, shifting, liquid black that seemed to drink the light of the distant stars. It had no discernible edges, its form flowing and changing with subtle, organic grace, like a drop of oil on water. There were no visible weapons, no sensor arrays, no engine ports. It was a seamless, featureless enigma of impossible geometry. It looked less like a machine and more like a captured piece of the night sky, given form and will. This was the vessel from the Stellar and Lance Asterisk's final, fragmented report. A collective shockwave of disbelief, and all rippled through the resonant network of the hegemony fleet. The disciplined, logical minds of thousands of crew members were suddenly confronted with an object that could not, exist. It violated a dozen fundamental principles of engineering and physics. A ship that size would require a power source that would radiate energy detectable across the galaxy. This one was almost perfectly silent. Its mass was immense, yet its gravitational footprint was negligible, as if it were constantly adjusting its own relationship with spacetime. By the first resonance, Kalen breathed, his usually sharp light softened into a diffuse, bewildered glow. "What is it?" "It is beautiful," Elara whispered, her own light shimmering with a resonance of pure, unadulterated wonder. She saw not a weapon but a work of art, a philosophical statement rendered in exotic matter. Before Vorlag could process the vessel's appearance, a communication channel opened. It was not a request. The channel was simply open. It bypassed all their security protocols, all their encryption layers, as if they were not even there. The main screen shimmered and the image of a human appeared. It was a female. Her hair was dark, pulled back from a face that was pale and unadorned. Her eyes were a deep, calm brown. She wore a simple, dark uniform with no rank insignia or decoration. She sat in a chair in a room that was starkly lit and devoid of any visible technology. She did not look like a warrior or an empress. She looked like a scholar. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Unified Nations," she said. Her voice was the same calm, measured tone from the message. It was translated into the hegemony's resonant language with perfect fidelity. "On behalf of humanity, I thank you for accepting our invitation, High Arbiter Vorlag." The calm, personal address was another shock. She knew his name. She had identified him without any formal introduction. She spoke as if this were a planned meeting between equals, not a tense confrontation between a galactic superpower and a backwater species. Vorlag gathered himself, his golden light solidifying. "You are addressing the Cygnian hegemony. Your vessel's method of arrival is unconventional, and its design is unknown to our databases." It was the greatest understatement of his long life. "She is the HCS Odyssey Asterisk," Ambassador Rostova replied, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth entering her tone as she spoke the name. "Her design is our own. As for her arrival, she does not travel through space in the conventional sense. It is more complex than that." "Your ship emits no detectable drive signature," Kalen interjected, his voice sharp and accusatory. "It defies the laws of energy conservation. That is not complex. It is impossible." Rostova's gaze shifted to him. Her eyes seemed to hold a profound and weary understanding. "Strategos Kalen, your understanding of the universe is based on what you call immutable laws. You see reality as a finished text, a set of rules to be read and obeyed. Humanity has learned that the text is still being written. The laws are not rules, they are suggestions, habits. The universe has patterns, but it is not bound by them." This was philosophical heresy. It was the ravings of a madman, spoken with the serene confidence of a sage. "Explain the nature of your vessel," Vorlag commanded, his resonance firm. "Explain the disappearance of our patrol ship, the Asterisk Stellar and Lance Asterisk." "Asterisk Odyssey is not a battleship in the way you would understand it," Rostova began, her hands resting calmly in her lap. "It is a causality engine. It does not move through space, it navigates through probability. It exists in a state of quantum superposition until we choose to resolve its waveform at a specific set of coordinates. To you, it seems to appear from nowhere. To us, it has simply arrived at the most probable of its potential destinations." The command nexus was silent. The concepts Rostova spoke of were known to hegemony physicists, but only on the subatomic scale. They were the strange, paradoxical rules that govern the building blocks of reality, not the macro-level engineering of starships. To apply quantum mechanics on this scale was unthinkable, a task that would require computational power and energy control that bordered on the divine. And the stellar and lance asterisk? Kalen pressed, his disbelief warring with a growing sense of dread. Your vessel entered a region of space where we were calibrating the Odyssey *S primary field, Rostova explained patiently. The ship was in a state of high causal flux. Your patrol vessel was not destroyed by us. Its own internal systems, exposed to a field of indeterminate causality, simply followed a path of least resistance to their most probable state of failure. A cascade of 1 in a trillion malfunctions, all occurring simultaneously. We observed its disappearance. We did not cause it. We regret the loss of your crew. The explanation was more terrifying than any admission of aggression. A weapon that destroys is understandable. A presence that causes reality itself to fray, that makes your own technology turn on you through the sheer mathematics of probability, was a nightmare. It was a weapon that could not be shielded against, could not be fought. You have weaponized reality itself, Kalen whispered, his voice resonating with a horror that transcended tactical concern. We have not, Rostova corrected gently. We have simply learned to have a conversation with it. The universe is not a static stage strategos. It is a dynamic, living system of potential. We have learned to ask it questions. The Odyssey is our question. Vorlag felt the foundations of his worldview crumbling. The hegemony's power was based on mastery of the known. Their ships bent space, their weapons harnessed the power of suns, their shields were bastions of physical law. They were masters of the physical realm, but the humans, they had bypassed the physical entirely and were now manipulating the metaphysical, the very source code of existence. Their chaotic, unpredictable nature was not a flaw. It was a reflection of their attunement to the quantum chaos that underpinned everything. Why reveal this to us now? Vorlag asked, his voice heavy. Why invite us here? If you possess such power, you have no need of us. That is where you are mistaken, High Arbiter, Rostova said, and for the first time a shadow of gravity crossed her face. The calm scholar was replaced by a stateswoman facing a crisis. We invited you here because we have a common enemy, an enemy that cannot be defeated with conventional weapons or fleets or even with a vessel like the Odyssey. You call it the attenuation, we call it the static. The holographic screen behind her changed. Showed a deep space observatory, a complex latticework of sensors floating in the dark. Then the view zoomed in on a sensor reading, a complex multidimensional waveform that Vorlag recognized instantly. It was the signature of the void, the profile of the attenuation. We have been studying it for over 200 of our years, Rostova stated. Long before it reached your borders, our chaotic expansion, as your strategos called it, was not random. We were not conquering, we were running. We were searching, we were trying to understand what the static is, where it came from, and how to stop it. The Odyssey was not built to fight you. She was built to face the static. The revelation struck the command nexus with the force of a physical blow. The humans were not a burgeoning threat. They were the first line of defense. Their frantic, messy history, their desperate innovation, had been a response to a terror the hegemony was only just beginning to comprehend. Your reality anchors, your containment fields, they are based on reinforcing local physical laws, Rostova continued, her voice precise and analytical. But the static does not break the laws, it unwrites them. It erodes the fundamental constants of the universe. It is a slow-burn entropy cascade, returning spacetime to a state of null information. You cannot build a wall against it because it is the dissolution of the very concept of a wall. Loremaster Alara stepped forward, her light a soft, inquisitive pulse. And you believe your vessel, this causality engine, can stop it? Rostova's gaze softened as she looked at Alara. The Odyssey cannot stop it. She is not a weapon against the static. She is a shield of a sort. Her causality field can stabilize a region of spacetime, insulating it from the encroaching erosion. She can protect a world, a system, but she is only one ship. She is a proof of concept, a desperate hope. We cannot outrun the static forever, and we cannot shield our entire galaxy. We do not have the resources or the time. Her eyes met Vorlag's across the void, a bridge of understanding forming between the ancient, logical being of light and the ephemeral, paradoxical human. We came here today not to threaten you, but to ask for your help. Our understanding of quantum mechanics is intuitive, experimental, chaotic. Yours is based on millennia of precise mathematical observation. We have the question. We believe you may hold the key to the answer. Together, we might be able to devise a way to not just shield ourselves from the static, but to reverse it. Alone, we will both be erased. The silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of tension or fear, but of profound, paradigm-shattering revelation. Kalen's hard blue light had softened, the sharp edges of his certainty blurred by the scale of the truth he had just been shown. Alara's form glowed with a brilliant, fascinated light, the scholar in her awakened by the greatest intellectual challenge in galactic history. Vorlag looked from the impossible ship before him to the images of his own fleet, so powerful, so orderly, and now so tragically inadequate. His entire civilization's philosophy had been predicated on the idea that with enough logic, enough time, enough power, the universe could be perfectly understood and controlled. But a species that had existed for a cosmic blink of an eye had just shown him that the true nature of the universe was not order, but infinite, chaotic potential, and that the only way to survive it was not to control it, but to embrace it, to have a conversation with it. "You have underestimated us, High Arbiter," Rostova said, her voice soft but clear. "And we perhaps have underestimated you. We saw your rigid logic and your vast empire and assumed you were inflexible, arrogant. But your presence here with your entire fleet is not the act of a tyrant. It is the act of a guardian, a protector, willing to use overwhelming force to defend your people from a perceived threat." Vorlag felt a strange resonance at her words. She understood. She saw past their power to their purpose. "We do not offer you an alliance of fleets and armies," Rostova concluded. "We offer you an alliance of minds, of philosophies, the union of your logic and our chaos. It may be the only thing in the universe that can stand against the silence that is coming for us all." Vorlag looked at the human ambassador, at the impossible ship floating serenely amidst his grand armada, and then at the memory of the creeping void on his star charts. The equation had changed. A new variable had been introduced, one that transformed an inevitable end into a desperate, uncertain hope. The future was no longer a predictable vector. It was a field of infinite, terrifying, and brilliant possibility. "Ambassador Rostova," Vorga resonated, his voice carrying across the void, no longer as a high arbiter addressing a lesser species, but as one scholar to another on the precipice of the ultimate discovery. "Begin your data transfer. Let us see what our combined logic can create." The integration was a process of slow, cautious revelation, a delicate dance between two fundamentally different modes of existence. The grand convergence chamber, once the heart of rigid hegemony logic, now played host to a human delegation. They were a small group, led by Ambassador Rostova, and they moved through the crystalline halls of the asterisk symmetry of truth with a quiet purpose that the Lumen found both unsettling and fascinating. They did not shimmer or resonate. They walked, their soft-soled boots a strange, rhythmic counterpoint to the silent hum of the ship. They breathed the recycled air, a complex, messy biological process that stood in stark contrast to the Lumen's direct energy absorption. Loremaster Alara found herself spending most of her time with the human science team. They were led by a man named Dr. Aris Thorne, whose mind, Alara quickly discovered, was a brilliant, beautiful labyrinth of chaotic inspiration. While a Lumen scientist would approach a problem by constructing a perfect, linear proof from established axioms, Thorne would attack it from a dozen different angles at once. He scribbled on transparent data slates with a stylus, his notations a wild mix of established physics, speculative mathematics, and what looked to Alara like abstract art. "You see, the static isn't just eating space-time," Thorne explained one cycle, gesturing animatedly at a swirling, complex simulation he had created. "That's the effect, not the cause. It's a decay of informational density. Imagine the universe as a message of near-infinite complexity. The static is a process that simplifies that message. It's not deleting it, it's rounding it down. A star becomes generic plasma, a planet becomes undifferentiated matter, a living being becomes base carbon and water. It's the ultimate heat-death, but on a quantum informational level. A process of simplification," Alara resonated, the concept clicking into place within her own crystalline mind. "Our reality anchors attempt to reinforce the complexity. But we are shouting the message back at a tide of silence. It is not a sustainable solution." "Exactly," Thorne exclaimed, his face lighting up with the joy of shared understanding. "We can't outshout it, but what if we could change the message, not reinforce it, but harmonize with the decay, introduce a new piece of information, a new axiom that the static can't simplify?" This was the core of the human proposal. It was an idea born of their chaotic, adaptive nature. They did not seek to build a bigger wall, they sought to teach the river a new way to flow. The asterisk odyssey was the first step. Its causality engine did not fight the laws of physics. It introduced a state of such profound quantum complexity, a superposition of all possible states, that the static simplifying effect was nullified. The ship was not a fortress. It was a paradox so dense that the static could not solve it. Meanwhile, Strategos Kalin worked with the human military liaisons. He found them to be infuriatingly and impressively pragmatic. His own strategic doctrines were elegant, geometric things, fleets moving in perfect, predictable formations of overwhelming force. The human commander, a stern woman named General Lin, thought in terms of feints, bluffs, asymmetric warfare, and what she called acceptable losses, a concept that was utterly alien to the Lumen, who viewed the loss of any single unit as a failure of the entire system. "Your fleet is magnificent, strategos," Lin commented as they reviewed a joint tactical simulation. The hegemony armada moved like a single, perfect organism, while the much smaller contingent of human ships darted and weaved around it. "It's a hammer that can shatter planets, but the static isn't a planet. It's a fog. You can't smash a fog. Your proposal is to use the Odyssey to shield a combined research outpost in the penumbra of the attenuation," Kalen resonated, his light a skeptical blue. "You would place our finest minds and your own directly in the path of the enemy. It is a reckless strategy." "It's a calculated risk," Lin countered, her eyes fixed on the simulation. "We need more data. We need to get up close and personal with this thing. The Asterisk Odyssey can protect the station, create a stable bubble of reality for the research to proceed. Your fleet will be the guard, the hammer, ready to strike at any secondary threats that might emerge from the chaos the static leaves in its wake." Kalen began to see. The humans were not asking him to abandon his strategies. They were asking him to adapt them, to use his overwhelming, ordered power as the anvil against which their chaotic, unpredictable hammer could strike. It was a synthesis, a duality, like the simple circle and line they had first shown the hegemony. High Arbiter Vorlag spent his time in dialogue with Ambassador Rostova. Their conversations were long, quiet, and profound. They spoke of philosophy, of history, of the nature of existence. Vorlag explained the hegemony's core belief in a knowable, logical universe, a cosmos that was ultimately a solvable equation. Rostova, in turn, explained humanity's turbulent worldview, born of a planet of finite resources, constant change, and the ever-present shadow of death. "We are not strong because we are certain, High Arbiter," she told him one evening as they stood before the starfield in the command nexus. "We are strong because we have learned to live with uncertainty. For us, the universe has never been a safe, predictable home. It is a vast, dark ocean, and we are tiny ships in a storm. We have had to learn to navigate by intuition, by faith, by desperate hope, as much as by science. We innovate or we die. That is the core of our being." Vorlag watched her. She was so fragile, a creature of soft tissue and flowing blood, her life a mere spark in the great expanse of time. Yet her species had conceived of a vessel that his own ancient, powerful civilization had deemed impossible. They had done it not through serene contemplation over millennia, but through frantic despair. Necessity, their weakness, their mortality was the crucible of their greatest strength. The joint research station named Vanguard was established. A marvel of hegemony engineering, a crystalline lattice of laboratories and habitats, it was towed into the twilight zone of the attenuation's edge. The hegemony fleet, a silent ring of jeweled warships, stood guard in the stable space behind it, and before it, a solitary sentinel against the encroaching emptiness, floated the HCS Odyssey. From Vanguard, the combined science teams began their work. The Asterisk Odyssey projected its causality field, a bubble of stable reality that pushed back against the informational decay of the static. Inside this bubble, Lumen and human scientists worked side by side, their methods clashing, and then merging into something new and powerful. The Lumen provided the precise instrumentation and the deep theoretical framework. Humans provided the reckless experimentation, the intuitive leaps of logic that often led to dead ends, but sometimes they led to breakthroughs. The first major discovery came when they turned the Odyssey, unique sensors not on the static itself, but on the space within Asterisk it. The ship, being a causality engine, could perceive not just what was, but what could have been. It could detect the echoes of erased information, the faint ghosts of the reality that the static had consumed. Ilara and Thorn were monitoring the data feed from the Odyssey Asterisk S-core when the anomaly appeared. It was faint, a structured signal buried deep within the informational noise of the void. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was patterned, repetitive. "It's a signal," Thorn breathed, his fingers flying across his console. "It's degraded, almost completely lost in the entropy, but it's there. It's a message." The message was ancient, far older than either of their civilizations. The Asterisk Odyssey Asterisk S systems worked to reconstruct it, pulling the fragmented data from the ghost realm of erased possibilities. Slowly, painfully, a picture began to form. It was not a message of hope. It was a warning, a final testament from a species that had faced the static eons ago and lost. Vorlag, Kalen, Ilara, Rostova, and Lin gathered in the main lab on Vanguard as the final reconstruction of the message was projected into the center of the room. It showed a species unlike any they had ever seen, beings of pure, flowing energy, their forms dancing in cities of woven light. And it showed their end. It showed the static, the creeping void, consuming their worlds, their stars, their entire civilization, until nothing was left but the silent, empty void. But there was more. The message contained data, star charts, physics equations that were both familiar and terrifyingly advanced. They had not called it the static. They had a name for it. They called it the Great Filter, and their final, chilling revelation was that it was not a natural phenomenon. It was not a process of entropy. It was artificial. "It is a weapon," Kalen resonated, his blue light flickering with a cold, hard fury. "A tool of cosmic sterilization designed to erase any civilization that reaches a certain level of technological or philosophical complexity." The message confirmed his words. The ancient species had detected its source, the engine that was generating the ever-expanding field of informational decay. They had tried to fight it. They had failed. Their final act was to embed this warning, this time capsule of knowledge, into the very fabric of their own destruction, hoping that one day, a species with the ability to read the echoes of erased reality might find it. A species that had built a ship like the Odyssey. They were a Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale, Rostova said, her voice a strained whisper as she read the translated data. They controlled the energy output of their entire galaxy, and it erased them as if they were nothing. The scale of the threat was beyond comprehension. This was not a mindless force of nature. This was a deliberate, intelligent act of cosmic genocide, perpetrated by a power so advanced, so ancient, that it treated entire galaxies as weeds to be pruned from the garden of the cosmos. Their own conflict, the hegemony's fears of humanity, humanity's struggle for survival, it was all an insignificant prelude to the real war. But the message contained one final piece of information, a desperate last-ditch effort. The ancient species had created something before they fell, a countermeasure. Not a weapon to destroy the filter's engine, for they knew they could not win a direct confrontation. Instead, they had created a sanctuary, a place outside of normal spacetime, a pocket universe shielded from the influence of the filter. They called it the archive, and they had left a key, a set of coordinates. The coordinates did not point to a place within the galaxy. They pointed to the absolute void between galaxies, a place of profound and utter emptiness. "It is where they intended to flee," Alara said, her voice filled with a deep, sorrowful reverence for this long-dead people. "A place to preserve the memory of the universe, the knowledge of all the civilizations the filter has erased." Vorlag looked at Rostova. The human ambassador's face was pale, but her eyes held a fierce, determined light. The so-called impossible battleship had been their answer to a problem they thought was a natural disaster. Now they knew the truth. The Odyssey was not just a shield. It was the key. It was the only vessel in their combined fleets that could navigate to those coordinates, that could translate the paradoxical language of the key and potentially open the way to this archive. "Our purpose is now clear," Vorlag resonated, his voice filling the lab with a new, unshakable certainty. His world of perfect logic had been shattered, but in its place was a new, higher logic, the logic of survival against an unthinkable foe. "The hegemony and humanity are no longer two separate species. We are two hands of a single will. The Odyssey will not be a human ship any longer. It will be our first ship, the first vessel of a new, unified civilization." He turned to Kalen, whose blue light burned with a fire he had never seen before. "Strategos, your fleet has a new mission. You will defend the Odyssey with every ship, every life under your command. It is no longer just a vessel. It is the repository of all our futures." To Alara, he said, "Loremaster, you and Dr. Thorne will lead the scientific effort. Decipher this key. Unlock the path to the archive. What we find there may be our only hope." Finally, he looked to Rostova. The silence between them was filled with a complete and total understanding. The grand, cosmic irony was not lost on him. The chaotic, unpredictable, emotional humans, the species the hegemony had so feared and dismissed, had not brought war or ruin. They had brought salvation. They had brought a purpose vast enough to unite a galaxy. They had built an impossible ship, not for a war between stars, but for a war against the silence at the end of all things. "The Odyssey is ready, High Arbiter," Rostova said, her voice quiet but firm. "Her crew is ready." Vorlag gave a slow, deliberate nod, his crystalline form resonating with a resolve that echoed through the entire station. Outside, in the cold, silent void, the impossible ship waited. Its flowing, liquid-black hull seemed to hold the light of every star they had ever known, and every star they were now fighting to save. The journey to the coordinates would be a journey into the unknown, a leap of faith for two species who had only just learned to trust each other. But as they stood together, human and lumen, on the edge of the abyss, they were no longer afraid of the dark. They were afraid of the silence, and they would spend every last spark of their combined existence to make sure it did not have the final word. The great, terrifying symphony of the cosmos was under threat, and they had just become its unlikely, defiant conductors.